Good morning, colleagues and friends. Welcome to WPS 2018. Education, we know, is an uplifting and integrating force. It uplifts as people acquire skills and knowledge to lead dignified lives, fulfill their aspirations, contribute to society. It is also an integrating force because as people improve their lives through education, we better the chances of narrowing the inequality in our society. And these two forces, they reinforce each other. But both objectives are being challenged today. Technology is advancing rapidly, and it puts a much shorter expiry date on whatever we learn in the education system, in schools, in higher education, and globalization has widened inequality. So both forces are being challenged today. Recently, I've spoken extensively, in Parliament especially, on what we have done and will be doing to strengthen the integrative aspect of education. So today, I will not talk about inequality. I met with some of you outside and I asked, what do you expect me to talk about? Some told me you'll talk about inequality. Wrong answer. Today, I want to talk about the changes we need to make to ensure education continue to uplift lives and prepare our young for the future. This is the central question every educator in the world is asking. How do we prepare our young for the future? Because change is a constant in education, change is a constant in life. A recent article in The Economist, I think it was about 3 weeks ago, it lauded the success of Singapore's education system. It noted that our system is going through, in quote, a quiet revolution. And despite our achievements, the Singapore system wants to be better. And that is quite an apt description of the changes taking place. We do not change for change's sake. As we change, we are careful to retain the core strengths of our system, to deliver students of sound values, strong fundamentals in numeracy, literacy, and critical soft skills. Our good PISA scores is something we must value, and it affirmed our approach so far. So in that sense, the changes we push for, we have never noisily labeled them as something sacred that we have slaughtered. The system is already well developed. I don't think we are in the building up phase anymore. But as it becomes more complex, we need to be clear-eyed that in this very mature system, there are trade-offs within the system. And we must take significant, bold steps to rebalance those trade-offs when needed. In my speech at the Economic Society of Singapore, I stated 4 such trade-offs. Some of you might have already read it, but let me just recap the 4 trade-offs that I see are important. The first is the balance between rigor and joy. How much robustness we want in the system and hard work we require from students, versus making it learning fun and nurturing the joy of learning in our students. And we know, many of us realize, that education in schools is at risk of becoming too stressful. And maybe some unwinding is in order. The second is sharpening versus blurring of academic differentiation. How finely differentiated we want examination results to be as a tool for placement and admission, versus blunting the distinction of results between students so that we can gauge learning outcomes without encouraging an overly competitive culture in our schools. The reform of the PSLE scoring system, effective 2021, and I think that's a very decisive step to reduce unnecessary competition. Third trade-off, customization versus stigmatization. How our curriculum caters to students of different learning paces and abilities versus inadvertently stigmatizing certain groups of students who are less academically inclined. I know many educators feel strongly about this, and we should really explore how to further leverage subject-based banding to optimize this trade-off. Fourth, skills versus paper qualifications. The importance of attaining credentials, such as NITEC certificates, diplomas, or degrees, versus acquiring skills that make a person effective at the job. And through Skills Future, we bring both aspects together to establish a multi-path system for our students. And underlying the system is a broader definition of meritocracy that our society must embrace over time. So the next phase of change in education will involve rebalancing these trade-offs effectively, decisively, and many initiatives are already underway. In 1997, we developed Thinking School, Learning Nation vision to strengthen thinking and inquiry among students. And during this earlier phase of change, we reduced curriculum content by about 30%, enhanced teacher training, and encouraged the sharing of best practices and ideas across schools. In 2005, we embarked on the Teach Less, Learn More movement as a subsequent phase to further strengthen teachers' pedagogies. Our aim was to help teachers better engage students and develop their critical faculties through real-life learning experiences. Curriculum then was further reduced by 20% to create time and space for more active and independent learning. Thinking Schools, Learning Nation was framed from a national and systemic perspective. Teach less, learn more from the teacher's perspective. Both remain relevant and important, but to help our students meet the challenges of an uncertain, fluid future, and we must remember they are the ones that will face the future. So we need to usher in a new phase of change, one that is framed based on the student's perspective. And I call this phase of change, Learn for Life. Learn for life is a value, an attitude, and a skill that our students need to possess. And it is fundamental in ensuring that education remains an uplifting force in society. It is what underpins the Skills Future movement. It also has to be a principal consideration in our school system. Why has this become so important? In the past, Singapore, we attract MNCs, multinational corporations, to set up factories, set up offices here. We were the world's leading producer of disk drives. We knew what kind of talent those MNCs need, and we teach, we educate, and we prepare our students to fill up those defined job roles. Today, the MNCs are putting their innovation hubs, R&D centers in Singapore. Startups are sprouting all over, hoping to come up with the next big thing. We are witnessing the advent of lights-out manufacturing, where entire factories are automated. You step into it, you don't see anybody. But in the background, we have personnel with different skill sets to design the system and ensure that it hums along. And today, you can check in and board the aircraft in Changi Airport Terminal 4 without interfacing with a single human. And that has totally redefined what a customer officer is supposed to do. These innovation centers, startups, and automated environments are creating the jobs of tomorrow. We have some ideas, but not definitive ideas of what these jobs will be. What are these jobs that our students are going to take up? What we do know, however, is the shape of things to come. We know that our students need to be resilient, adaptable, and global in their outlook. They must leave the education system still feeling curious and eager to learn for the rest of their lives. These traits are not just adjectives that we tick off one by one. It is a fundamental shift in our mindset. I came across a recent article about how the author of the article, who's a middle-aged man, he was trying to learn coding, and I thought he described that mindset of lifelong learning quite well. And it is really not about searching for the next course to attend. It's not about how do I use up my $500 Skills Future credit. Instead, it is getting used to a certain state of discomfort. His key takeaway was not the technical coding skills that he picked up, but getting used to the feeling of always feeling inadequate. So in the article, he described what a coding coach told him. You need to get used to the idea of being out of depth all the time. You do not solve the same problem twice. You solve one, and the next level is even more challenging. And once again, you feel inadequate. But there is a global coding fraternity that you must learn how to tap on, and then you learn from one another, from that network. I see this attitude amongst many elderly learners. They are obviously lifelong learners. They do not know English well, they are not IT literate, but they are motivated to learn to use the computer, the apps on their smartphones, and embrace e-payment to minimize their trips to the ATM machines. For us, walking 300, 200 meters to an ATM machine is not very far. To some old folks, it's far. And so they have an incentive to use e-payments. It is uncomfortable for them, but I see the determination amongst these members of the Pioneer and Merdeka generation. Once we recognize this broader objective of education, examination and grades are comparatively small milestones in the life journey of a child. The ability to score in an examination, frankly, I think do not matter very much later on in the life of the child. There are several thrusts under the Learn for Life movement to address the trade-offs I described earlier. MOE will progressively explain the thrusts and the changes accompanying them. I will talk about just the first thrust today, which is how to better balance rigor and joy of learning in schools. We know that students derive more joy in learning when they move away from memorization, rote learning, drilling, and taking high-stakes exams. Very few students enjoy that. It is not to say that these are undesirable in learning, quite the contrary. They help form the building blocks for more advanced concepts and learning and can inculcate discipline and resilience and get students to get used to doing something difficult and overcome those difficulties. But there needs to be a balance between rigor and joy. And there is a fairly strong consensus that we have tilted too much to the former. Our students clearly do well, and their outcomes are reflected in our leading PISA scores over the years. So look at this chart. These are the red diamonds. It shows the 2015 PISA scores for science. Singapore is the biggest red diamond, and we score the highest amongst OECD countries. Well done to all our principals and educators. However, if we normalize the scores by the hours of study, we get the blue diamonds. So these are scores, but divided by the hours of study. And Singapore is actually below the OECD average if we normalize the scores, and behind countries like Finland, Germany, France, UK, and Japan. OECD data also shows that there is actually a negative relationship between academic outcomes and the total time spent on learning. So in this chart, the vertical axis is PISA science scores, horizontal chart is total learning time in hours per week, and strangely enough, it's actually a downward trend. So the more you study up to about 44 hours, results are more or less the same, but going beyond that, you start to see a drop. And the country that studied up to 60 hours per week, actually the results became quite bad. It fell below the average. Fortunately, you look at the red dot, which is Singapore, we are an outlier. Our students study more than their peers in many other countries, but we score exceptionally well. This is Singapore DNA. I think there's a fairly strong case that I think we can cut back on unnecessary inflation of effort, yet achieve equal or better outcomes. Our students will benefit when some of that time and energy devoted to drilling and preparing for examinations is instead allocated to preparing them for what matters to their future. In doing so, we have a few considerations. First, there is little room for further cut in curriculum. We have already done 2 significant rounds of reduction, in 1998 and then in 2005. And today, our curriculum coverage at all levels are comparable to the other education systems around the world. Further reduction, I think, will risk underteaching. What we should focus on is to curb effort inflation and review our assessment load and tuition load, both of which add to the repetitive and unnecessary effort of studying the same or even less material for the sake of scoring well in examinations. Second, whatever time we may free up for the students, we must avoid the tendency to fill it up with extra practice and drilling. Instead, treat this as curriculum time that we return to the schools, return to the principals and the teachers for better teaching and learning. Finally, we must be careful not to overdo the correction and inadvertently undermine the rigor in our system. Japan offers us a very useful experience that we can learn from. In the 1990s, they implemented in their school system an initiative called Yutori. For those who know Japanese, Yutori actually means relax in Japanese. The objective was to reduce rote learning and memory work and redirect students to learning creativity and soft skills. But the move backfired. As PISA scores of Japanese students deteriorated, parents' anxieties went up. Students start to worry that they can't do well in the university entrance examinations. Hence, the Yutori policy had to be unwound. 5 years later, the Japanese government had to increase curriculum content back and teaching hours back again. While well-intentioned, Yutori's objective was ahead of its time, and its implementation, not helped by an rather inappropriate name, was perceived to be too drastic a move. We can learn from Japan's experience. It is an instructive example demonstrating the challenge we might face as we recalibrate the balance between joy and rigor within our system. So given these considerations, we decided to do this. We will take the approach of reducing school-based assessment. We have succeeded in doing so before. This chart shows from bottom P1 all the way to P6, then S1 to S4. On the left is MOE mid-year examination, on the right is end-of-year examination. Every color block shows that there's an exam. So as recommended by Perry, the Primary Education Review and Implementation Committee, MOE removed mid-year examinations and year-end examinations in P1 from 2010. For P2 students, we further removed the mid-year examination. Shown in this chart, they are now in white, blanked, no examinations. As a result, we reduced the stress for lower primary students. I think by and large, they enjoy school more and have a positive start that focuses on curiosity and growth instead of examinations and grades. Teachers also appreciate the extra lesson time to ensure that our young students master the fundamentals at the start. So today, everyone, teachers, students, parents, have gotten used to not having to worry about examinations in P1 and for the most of P2. Academic results and rigor have not been affected. I think if MOE today declared that let's reintroduce exams mid-year and year-end for P1 and P2, I think we may have an uproar. We will build on this good work. We know that teaching and learning comprises three important components. Everyone, principals, you know that. Curricular goals and content, pedagogy, and assessment. And together they form a strong triangle. Today, these three components are not balanced. You can see assessment is tilted, the triangle. As we overemphasize assessment, we inadvertently reduce the time available for schools to focus on teaching and learning, and we need to redress this balance. We will therefore make another significant move and reduce school-based assessment load by 25% in each of the 2-year blocks in primary and secondary schools. We will remove all weighted assessments for P1 and P2 students. This means that in addition to what had been removed, we will further remove year-end examinations for P2. Schools will also not count any assessments towards an overall score for P1 and P2. In addition, we need to recognize that students go through different stages of learning, from lower to middle to upper primary, and then to lower secondary, and eventually upper secondary. Each stage requires a significant transition, and pupils need an adequate runway to adapt to the new curriculum demands. I remember my own transition from Sec 2 to Sec 3, quite a big transition. Suddenly, whatever I studied became a bit more chim. To help students build their confidence and develop an intrinsic motivation to learn during the transition, we should be less hasty in testing and examining students during these critical years. Hence, we will also remove the mid-year examinations at P3, P5, S1, and S3. As you see, the bars also turning white. That's all. Schools and parents need not worry about the pace of change being fast. We will implement these changes in stages. 2019, we will remove all weighted assessments in P1 and P2, as well as the mid-year examination in S1, what is now bordered red on the slides. The removal of mid-year examinations at P3, P5, and S3 will be carried out over the 2 years, in 2020 and 2021. I know educators will need some time to digest these changes. Some educators and parents, and many of you seated before me, might already be thinking, without mid-year examinations, can we substitute the removed examinations with class tests? So to be clear, class tests are those that count towards year-end results. Some have simulated environments like exams. They can be stressful, and they can also lead to loss of curriculum time. So let me first say that there's nothing wrong with having examinations and class tests. They are part and parcel of teaching and learning, but we need to use them in suitable quantity, balancing the triangle we showed just now. So MOE will set guidelines for schools so that there should be only one class test per subject per term. That can be counted towards the year-end score. To be clear, let me further explain with some illustrations. If your school administers in term 2 of P3 both a class test and a mid-year examination, so when the mid-year examination is removed, you can keep the class test, but you should not add another class test to replace the removed mid-year examination. Okay? If a school now administers only mid-year examination for term 2 in P3, when this mid-year examination is removed, you can replace the examination with a class test. But I would urge the school not to do so, as this will partially undo the reduction in assessment load. Instead, use the curriculum time freed up for better teaching and learning. So that I would urge you. And if a school already has not administered a class test or mid-year examination for term 2 in P3 and is comfortable with it, there is no need to add a test because of our guideline. These guidelines specify the maximum, not the norm. By all means, use formative tools such as worksheets, classwork, homework to gauge learning outcomes and the strengths of each child. These are not high-stake tests or examinations, which result in substantial loss of curriculum time. So our focus is to return curriculum time to the school for better teaching and learning. How will these changes add up? This will free up about 3 weeks of curriculum time every 2 years back to the schools. This time is now returned to the schools and teachers, and with it, the flexibility to pace out teaching and learning so as to avoid a mad rush to complete the syllabus to prepare for tests and examinations. And I'm sure all of you know how it was like, rushing. I hope schools will use the time well, for example, to conduct applied and inquiry-based learning. In applied and inquiry-based learning, our students observe, investigate, reflect, create knowledge. And that naturally will take up more time. For example, we can teach a child the area of a field is length times breadth. Go memorize the formula and then take the test. Very fast, you'll be done in 2 minutes. But in an inquiry approach, we will ask the child, this is a field, how do you find out what's the area? And then have them discuss and brainstorm. Some may decide draw little squares to fill up the field and count how many squares there are. Others may have their own methods, ingenious methods. After that, the teacher may bring them out to the school field to physically measure the length and breadth of the school field, before allowing the students to discover that length times breadth equals area. In art, we do not just ask students to draw something. When I was in primary school, the teacher would say, go draw a cat, go draw an apple, and I just draw. Now, we show them masterpieces. Ask them, what do you think Monet is thinking of? What do you think Van Gogh is thinking of? What is the artist trying to express? Then we ask them, now, what do you want to express? And from there, they conjure their artistic expression and their creation. Through the inquiry approach, students think and internalize concepts. The lessons are fun and more applied in nature. They are more likely to remember and enjoy the lesson, even though this will take up more time. The learning outcomes are better. These are backed up by research and also by ancient wisdom. With the time and space created from reducing the assessment load, we hope teachers will leverage effective inquiry-based pedagogies to enhance students' learning experiences. Our decision to reduce examinations is also backed by the experiences of trailblazers. One such school is Woodlands Ring Secondary. It has removed mid-year examinations for S1 to S3 students since 2012. So it has gone beyond what MOE is stipulating today, without affecting their students' O and N-level examination performances. With the time freed up, the school can dive deeper into the curriculum at a pace that suits each learner. For example, the mathematics department designed a learning trail for S1 students to extend their learning beyond the classroom. The school has received positive feedback from the staff, teachers, parents, students, that students are becoming more self-directed and more motivated. Henry Park Primary School has removed term assessments in term 1 and 3 for P3 to P6 students since 2014, and channeled the additional time into inquiry-based learning and student-initiated investigation. I have not touched on junior colleges. It can be a very stressful period for students. Our engagements with junior colleges tell us that there is a more complex set of issues in JCs, one of which involves preparing students well for the A-levels in order to enroll into universities. So we will conduct a separate review for junior colleges. We will also implement several related changes to support the reduction in school-based assessments. The first is EduSafe Awards. As we remove all examinations and weighted assessments at P1 and P2, how are you going to nominate EduSafe Awards? Yeah, we foresaw that. There are 2 awards that is in question here: EduSafe Merit Bursary to P1 and P2 students, and Good Progress Award to P2 and P3 students. Yeah. But it is important to retain these awards, as they celebrate students' academic success and learning milestones. Every year, I personally give out about 2,000 EduSafe Awards in my constituency. And we group them in fairly small sizes, 60 to 80 students per session. And you can really see the pride and joy in the eyes of the parents and students, especially the younger ones. Senior Baosek Lo Yen Ling is very famous because she gave out in groups of 6. 25, oh, it has increased. Yeah, when she first started, I thought she gave out a group of 6 or 12, and she will inevitably lose her voice during that time. So this is an administrative obstacle that we will have to overcome, the fact that there's no more examinations for P1 and P2. Because after all, examination results are but one outcome of education. Teachers can observe the demonstration of positive traits in students, like diligence, curiosity, collaboration, and enthusiasm, through daily lessons and learning activities that demonstrate a student's learning orientation. It is not as quantitative and standardized as school-based examinations, but qualitative judgment is a fact of life, and we can apply that on EduSafe Merit Bursary and Good Progress Award for young students who just entered the school system. MOE will provide more details and guidelines to help teachers. We will keep the process simple and easy to administer. The award criteria will remain unchanged for all other levels. We will make adjustments to the holistic development profile, or more commonly known as the report book, to better reflect a student's progress in learning, to discourage excessive peer comparison. These adjustments will also help to reduce test anxiety. For P1 and P2, where there will be no more weighted assessments, we will use qualitative descriptors instead of marks to inform parents of their child's progress. This is a further development from holistic assessment, which we started in 2009 based on the Perry recommendations. For other levels, where marks are available, they will be reflected as whole numbers instead of decimal points, which are an unnecessary precision. We will also remove certain academic indicators, such as the student's class and level positions. I know that coming in first or second, in Chinese they say 考第一名,第二名, in class or level, it has traditionally been a proud recognition of a student's assessment. It is even a greeting used in certain festivities, like Chinese New Year, 恭喜发财,祝你每年考第一. In English is 恭喜发财, I hope your child will always come in first. So it's very deep in our culture, yeah. But removing these indicators is for a good reason, so that the child understands from young that learning is not a competition. It's a self-discipline that they have to master for life. Notwithstanding, the report book should still contain some form of yardstick and information to allow students to judge their relative performance, evaluate their strengths and weaknesses. For secondary school students, these are also important information and form a basis for them in selecting their subject combinations. So the revised holistic development profile will be implemented in 2019. I'm confident that the students who are experiencing the changes firsthand will be able to see the value in what we are doing. However, for this shift to succeed, we will also need to bring in the most important stakeholder, the parents, on board. We will need to show parents that the reduction does not compromise on academic rigor. Instead, we are optimizing the number of assessments students have to sit for today for better results. We must expect some things are beyond MOE's or the school's control, such as parents comparing notes in their WhatsApp groups that often raise anxieties and sending their children for tuition and enrichment. I have no intention to heed the call to ban tuition. It is not a criminal activity. Parents do this out of care and concern for their children. And many do-gooders in the community conduct free or low-cost tuition to help weaker students cope with their studies, and that's a good thing. But there are negative tuition stories too. During my school visits, some students, sometimes I'll ask them, do you find stressful in school? They'll say, no, but tuition is stressful. And they will tell me they are very tired on weeknights after school or on the weekends, because their day is packed with tuition classes. Worse still, they do not find learning fun as a result, and lessons have taken over their days and their weekends. So there is room for parents to step back, give children space to explore and to play. On MOE's end, there is also room for us to step back. review the way we have been involving and engaging parents in school life, and make the nature of partnership between parents and schools clearer. Sometimes, in our zest to engage parents, we may have contributed to their anxieties. For example, some teachers will WhatsApp parents, telling them to ensure that their children complete their homework and also list what homework to do. So you take a look at this message on the screen. Dear parents, please find below the instructions for the weekend. Number 1, complete math workbook. Number 2, learn spelling, sign English, sign consent form. Thank you for helping to ensure that your child completes the above. Have a great weekend. This is an actual message that a parent received one Friday night, asking him to ensure his child completes all this homework over the weekend. Yeah. The teacher meant well, but such messages create expectations for parents to monitor their child's homework very closely and can cause anxieties amongst parents, especially working parents. What's worse, some parents may develop a reliance on these messages and expected to be reminded on what homework to check. And if parents can become reliant, what more the student? We can be more mindful of how we are shaping children and parents' behavior. Teachers can set up a clearer contract with parents at the start of the school year. Take a look at this message. Dear parents, it has been a great first week of school. From this week onwards, your child will be informed of the books to bring each day. But please don't pack it for them or remind them. Allow them to learn responsibility. I promise you, if they forget to bring their books, it will not affect their grades or their future. Thank you. This is not an actual message. I wrote it. I'm sure you can improve upon it. The teacher can, for example, assure parents that forgetting to bring a book will not affect a child's final assessment for the year or their future. But if the child does not learn to take personal responsibility, that will certainly affect their future. So we need to change our language of communication with parents, away from they have to get their work done, examinations are important and a lot is at stake, or this is how their results are compared to their classmates and their peers, to the question that matters most for young students, which is, what makes your child's eyes light up? MOE will develop ways to support our teachers and our parents in this. We will provide guidelines to schools to give greater clarity on involving and engaging parents in their child's education in a balanced and meaningful manner. We will also support schools in recalibrating parent-teacher engagement practices. We will reach out to parents and provide them with effective and useful tips on how to support their child, not just in academics, but also in the development of their character and soft skills. These initiatives will be rolled out in the coming year and beyond. Let me conclude. What I just talked about is a significant but calibrated structural change to reduce effort inflation, to create a better environment for holistic development. It is part of our journey to constantly evolve and improve, like what the Economist articles say. MOE will support schools and teachers in implementation, but the entire system must move together as one. And whether it succeeds or not depends on the intangible professional cultural changes within schools. And teachers are at the center of it, just as you are the central pillar of the education system. So within schools, it is critical for school leaders to take the lead, be the agents of change, engage teachers, and decide how to use the freed up time well to deliver better lessons and better education outcomes. With the removal of one mid-year examination in every 2-year block, teachers will not need to rush through the syllabus. This gives them time and space to explore new areas and try out more effective pedagogies. If we expect our students to learn through trying and failing and trying again, teachers should also embody this spirit and set a good example for the students. We have a strong and excellent teaching force, an advantage that not many countries enjoy. If we harness the passion, creativity, and dynamism of the teaching force, we can make bold and meaningful changes to prepare our students well for the future. This is our collective moral imperative. Thank you very much for your attention.